On July 1, 1996, friends found Margaux Hemingway dead in a small Santa Monica apartment. She was 42. For a woman once sold to America as a $1 million face, the ending was almost too cruelly designed. No yacht, no red carpet, no flashbulbs, no perfume campaign. Just an apartment by the sea, unanswered calls, and the terrible silence that comes when glamour finally stops performing. 21 years earlier, Margaux had been introduced like a national event. The granddaughter of Ernest Hemingway. 6 feet tall, blonde, wild-eyed, expensive-looking. A girl from Idaho who suddenly belonged to New York, fashion magazines, Studio 54, and a Fabergé contract so large the industry had to sit up and pretend it had always believed in tall girls from the mountains. Very convenient. America loves a beautiful woman most when it can turn her into property. Margaux was not just a model. She was a headline with cheekbones. A famous last name in a body the camera could worship. A Hemingway who could sell perfume. That last part is important. Ernest Hemingway had sold masculinity, war wounds, alcohol, Africa, Paris, bullfights, boats, and the myth of the wounded American man. Margaux was asked to sell desire. Same family business, different packaging. But the problem with a name like Hemingway is that it does not sit quietly behind you. It walks in first. Before Margaux spoke, the name spoke. Before she failed, the curse was waiting. Before she even knew what fame would cost, people were already touching the story like a lucky charm. A beautiful girl, a literary dynasty, a $1 million contract. What could possibly go wrong? That is how American tragedies usually begin. Not with warning, with applause. The public thought Margaux had inherited a golden door. But some inheritances are not doors. Some are rooms with no exits. To understand how a woman became famous before she was ready, loved before she was known, and haunted before was old enough to defend herself, we cannot begin with the body in Santa Monica. We have to go back to Idaho, before the perfume, before the covers, before the men with cameras, before Margaux Hemingway became a brand. Back to the girl who was born under a name. America had already turned into a monument. Before she was Margaux Hemingway, she was Margaux Hemingway. That missing letter matters more than it should. The story goes that she changed the spelling after learning she had been named after Chateau Margaux wine. Of course she did. If your family name is already Hemingway, why not add a French wine label to the first name and let destiny wear sunglasses? It sounds glamorous. It also sounds like branding. Margaux grew up far from the polished rooms where people later studied her face. She was raised around Ketchum, Idaho, in the long shadow of Ernest Hemingway, the famous grandfather whose life had already been turned into American mythology. The mountain air, the hunting, the drinking, the big talk, the masculine legend, the whole rough, expensive museum of Papa. But Margaux was not Ernest. She was a girl growing up inside the afterlife of his reputation. That is a strange place to be raised. Most children inherit furniture. Margaux inherited atmosphere. The Hemingway name did not simply mean literature. It meant talent, danger, alcohol, masculinity, adventure, sadness, suicide, and the exhausting American belief that suffering becomes beautiful if the person suffering is famous enough. Very healthy environment for a child. Margaux's father was Jack Hemingway, Ernest's son. Her younger sister Mariel would later become an actress. The family was connected to beauty, nature, celebrity, and damage in almost equal portions. From the outside, that looks fascinating. From the inside, it can become weather. The name made people curious before Margaux had done anything. It opened doors, yes. But doors can be traps when everyone on the other side already knows what story they want from you. She was tall, striking, not delicate, not ordinary. A face that did not have to ask the room for attention. That should have been power. But beauty inside a famous family is rarely left alone. Someone will find a way to make it useful. Soon, New York would come calling, and New York does not gently invite, it devours with good lighting. Margaux would leave Idaho as a young woman and enter a world that promised to make her unforgettable. The catch was simple. It would remember the image better than the person. And the first proof came in the form of perfume. The Fabergé contract was the kind of number that turns a person into a headline. $1 million. In the mid-1970s, that was not just money. That was a declaration. Margaux Hemingway had become more than a model. She had become an event, the face of Babe perfume. The The country girl from Idaho turned international cover girl. The granddaughter of Ernest Hemingway turned living advertisement. Very tasteful, very American. Take a young woman with a famous name, wrap her in desire, spray perfume over the family damage, and call it opportunity. The fashion world understood what it had. Margaux looked expensive without trying. She looked athletic, wild, golden, slightly dangerous, like someone who had walked out of a ski lodge and into a magazine cover by accident. That accident, naturally, had accountants. The cameras loved her height, the magazines loved her name, the public loved the idea of her. That last part is always dangerous. Being loved as an idea is not the same as being known. At the height of the campaign, Margaux seemed to have arrived before most people her age had even found themselves. Covers, parties, famous people, rooms where everyone acted bored because admitting excitement would make them look poor. New York opened, Studio 54 opened, the celebrity machine opened its mouth, and Margaux, still young, walked in. She later admitted she had been naive. She thought people liked her for herself, her humor, her warmth, her good qualities. Then came the professional leeches. That phrase says everything. Fame does not only bring admirers, it brings people with straws. They sip your name, they sip your access, they sip your confusion. Then they call it friendship. Margaux had the look, she had the name, she had the contract, she had the money. But there is a brutal truth inside sudden fame. When people meet you as a symbol, they do not always notice when the person starts disappearing. The Fabergé deal made Margaux rich and visible. It also made her useful. And once a beautiful woman becomes useful, everyone around her starts calling the extraction support. Next came Hollywood. Because apparently selling perfume was not enough, America wanted to see whether the Hemingway girl could suffer beautifully on film too. Hollywood did not look at Margaux Hemingway and see a beginner. It saw a package, the name, the face, the height, the headlines, the perfume contract, the sister, the scandal potential, all very artistic naturally. In 1976, Margaux starred in Lipstick, a film built around violence, violation, revenge, and glossy exploitation dressed up as drama. Her younger sister Mariel appeared in it too. That detail matters. The movie did not simply put Margaux on screen. It placed the Hemingway sisters into a story the public could consume with popcorn. Very classy, very subtle, very 1970s. Margaux wanted to act. That should not be mocked. Models who become actresses are often treated like they have committed social fraud, as if beauty disqualifies a woman from wanting craft. But Hollywood had not built Margaux slowly. It threw her into visibility and then acted surprised when the transition hurt. Critics were not kind. The industry wanted the body, the name, the publicity. Then it judged the woman for not instantly becoming the actress the machine had never bothered to train. That is a neat little trick. First, sell her as fantasy, then punish her for being human. Lipstick was supposed to push Margaux into movie stardom. Instead, it exposed the problem that would follow her for years. She was famous enough to be used, not respected enough to be protected. Mariel, the younger sister, would later earn more serious acting attention. That added another kind of pressure. Now Margaux was not only carrying the Hemingway name, she was also being measured against her own sister. Families love comparison. The public loves it even more. One sister becomes the serious actress. The other becomes the model who could not quite cross over. Simple, cruel, marketable. Margaux kept working, but Hollywood never gave her a stable second act. The fashion world had made her huge. The movie world made her vulnerable. And vulnerability is not safe in rooms full of people trying to make a deal. As the offers became less golden and the attention became less kind, Margaux found herself inside the oldest American trap. She had been told fame would make her real. Instead, it made every wound more visible, and the parties were waiting. The trouble with glamorous rooms is that they photograph better than they feel. Studio 54 looked like freedom. Music, famous faces, cameras, velvet ropes, bodies moving under light, people behaving as if sleep was a failure of imagination. Margaux fit the picture perfectly. Tall, blonde, famous, rich, wounded in a way people could sense, but still wanted close enough to touch. She had the Hemingway name, and New York loves a name almost as much as it loves pretending not to care about names. The parties gave her movement. The alcohol gave her permission. That is how she described it later, in essence. Drinking seemed to loosen the fear. It made the rooms easier. It made strangers warmer. It made confidence feel available by the glass. Very generous, alcohol. It lends courage and charges interest to the nervous system. For a while, Margaux lived like the myth expected her to live. Big nights, big names, big entrances. A beautiful woman from a famous family moving through the decade as if the whole thing were designed for her. But the image was lying. The public saw glamour. Margaux felt pressure. The cameras saw attitude. She felt exposed. The name opened doors. The doors opened onto people who wanted pieces. That is the part of celebrity most fans prefer not to think about. Fame does not simply lift someone up. It increases the number of strangers who believe they have access. Access to your body, your time, your story, your name, your weakness. Margaux learned that the party world was not one big friendship circle with better clothes. It was a marketplace. Some people brought affection, some brought cameras, some brought drugs, some brought appetites and called them admiration. And Margaux, who had once thought people liked her for herself, began to understand the difference between being loved and being useful. That realization can make a person bitter. It can also make a person drink more. The Hemingway family had already turned drinking into part of the mythology. Ernest drank, men around him drank, literature drank, adventure drank, pain drank, and then called itself courage. Margaux inherited that script. But she did not inherit a body that could survive it forever. Soon the glamour began to thin. The contracts were not enough, the movies were not enough, the name was not enough. And the woman sold as Babe was beginning to feel much older than the advertisement. The Hemingway curse is one of those phrases people say as if tragedy becomes more interesting when it has branding. A curse. How dramatic, how literary, how convenient for everyone who would rather not say mental illness, addiction, family damage, and untreated pain. The Hemingway family had already been marked by suicide, alcoholism, and emotional wreckage before Margaux became famous. Ernest Hemingway died by suicide in 1961. Other relatives were part of the darker family record too. Margaux knew the shadow. She did not need a journalist to explain it to her. She lived under the last name. But the public loved the curse because it made suffering sound inherited, almost elegant. As if damage passed through the blood, wearing a tweed jacket and carrying a typewriter. Very poetic. Very useless. Margaux struggled with alcohol. She struggled with depression. She later went to the Betty Ford Center. These are not decorative details. They are not celebrity trivia. They are evidence that the woman inside the famous photograph was trying to survive something much larger than bad reviews. But survival is hard when the public prefers the legend. If Margaux drank, people saw Hemingway behavior. If she struggled, people saw Hemingway doom. If she broke down, people saw a family pattern. Where exactly was she supposed to stand as herself? That is the prison of a famous bloodline. Even your pain gets interpreted through someone else. Her grandfather's shadow was enormous. Her sister's career was rising. Her own modeling peak had come early, brutally early. By her 30s, the industry that had once treated her like the future was already looking elsewhere. Fashion has the attention span of a match. It flares, it burns, it drops the stick. Margaux tried to build another life. She took acting jobs. She married, divorced, married again, divorced again. She gave interviews. She admitted things that many people would have preferred she keep pretty. That honesty should have made people listen. Instead, it often became more material. A troubled beauty, a fallen model, a Hemingway tragedy in progress. The label was waiting before the ending arrived, and when the ending did arrive, people would act shocked, as if they had not been rehearsing it for years. Margaux's story cannot be told without Mariel. That is not because Margaux needs her sister to matter. It is because comparison was one of the knives in the room. Mariel Hemingway was younger. She became known as an actress, not simply as a face. She earned serious attention early, especially after Manhattan. She seemed to have crossed into the world Margaux wanted, but never fully held. That does not mean Mariel stole anything. Life is not that simple. Sisters can love each other and still become mirrors neither one asked for. The public, of course, loves ranking women. It is one of its laziest hobbies. The beautiful one, the serious one, the wild one, the stable one, the model, the actress, the tragedy, the survivor. Very efficient, Very stupid. Margaux had been first in the spotlight. She had the huge contract. She had the covers. She had the name glowing around her like neon. Then Mariel became the one critics took more seriously on screen. That had to hurt. Not because Margaux was petty, because she was human. A famous family does not protect you from ordinary pain. It simply gives ordinary pain better lighting. As the years passed, the Hemingway family story became increasingly public. Mariel would later speak openly about addiction, mental illness, and the shadow of suicide in the family. That work mattered because it pulled the subject out of gossip and into daylight. But during Margaux's life, the pattern was still eating people alive. She was not just fighting addiction, she was fighting the story already written for her. The public saw the tall blonde model from the Hemingway line and expected glamour with a tragic accent. That expectation can become a cage. If you recover, they are surprised. If you fall, they nod as if the ending had been obvious. Imagine trying to get well while strangers are already composing your obituary. Margaux did try. She went through rehab. She spoke about her drinking. She admitted the machine had used her. She attempted work after the peak, but every attempt had to push against the same question. Was she Margaux, or was she just the latest chapter in a family myth America found too fascinating to leave alone? That question followed her into the 1990s. And the rooms were getting smaller. The cruelest part of fame is not always losing it. Sometimes it is being famous enough to be recognized, but not powerful enough to be chosen. Margaux knew that place. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, the fashion world had moved on. Hollywood had not turned her into the movie star people once predicted. The great contract had become old news. The covers belonged to the past, but the names still worked. That meant people still wanted the story. Not always the woman. There is a difference. Margaux kept taking jobs. Some were films. Some were television. Some were smaller projects far from the glossy launch she had been promised. That is not shameful. Working is not failure. But the contrast was brutal. $1 million face in the 1970s. A woman chasing stability in the 1990s. The industry does not apologize for that. It simply calls someone difficult, troubled, faded, or unreliable, then moves on to the next girl with good bones and bad protection. Very elegant, very professional. Margaux's personal life continued to strain. Failed marriages, depression, recovery attempts, interviews that tried to explain what the camera had never been able to see. She once described becoming a celebrity as being in the eye of a hurricane. That image is almost too accurate. The center may feel calm for a moment, but everything around it is being torn loose. The tragedy is that Margaux was not stupid about what had happened to her. She saw the leeches. She saw the alcohol. She saw the danger of the name. She saw the difference between glamour and safety. Seeing the trap, however, does not mean you can walk out of it clean. That is the bitter joke. America loves the story of the beautiful young woman rescued from fame. It sells almost as well as the story of the beautiful young woman destroyed by it. What America rarely likes is the middle. The messy years, the recovery that does not stay perfect, the work that is not glamorous, the loneliness that does not photograph well. Margaux lived in that middle. Then, in 1996, she moved into a Santa Monica apartment. Small, coastal, quiet, far from the $1 million announcement that had once made her seem unstoppable. And then the phone calls went unanswered. The end came without the glamour America had attached to her name. No Hemingway villa, no dramatic final scene, no camera-ready tragedy under perfect lighting. Just a Santa Monica apartment and friends who became worried when she did not answer. That is the part that should make people quiet. The woman once announced as a sensation was found because people could not reach her. The coroner later ruled her death a suicide by overdose. That sentence is heavy enough. It does not need decoration. Margaux was 42. The timing made the story even more chilling. Her death came near the anniversary of Ernest Hemingway's suicide 35 years earlier. The public noticed immediately because of course it did. America has a terrible weakness for symmetry when someone else is dead. A famous grandfather, a famous granddaughter, a family pattern, a curse, a headline. Everything clicked into place so neatly that the actual woman almost disappeared. That is the final insult. Even in death, Margaux had to share the frame. The story became about the Hemingways, about tragedy across generations, about suicide in the family, about the beautiful model who could not escape the bloodline. Some of that was true. But truth can still flatten a person when it is arranged too neatly. Margaux was not only a symptom of a family curse. She was a girl from Idaho, a model who changed fashion contracts, a woman who learned too late that fame attracts users, an actress who wanted more than her body gave the camera, a sister, a daughter, a person who tried to recover, a person who said out loud that the glamorous life was not as simple as it looked. But the public prefers finished shapes, and nothing finishes a complicated life faster than a famous last name plus a tragic ending. The apartment became the final room in the story. But it should not be the only room. There was the Idaho room, the Fabergé room, the New York room, the Studio 54 room, the rehab room, the movie set, the interview chair, the family table. Margaux Hemingway lived in all of them. And if her end was an American tragedy, it was not only because she died young. It was because America had been watching her image for years and still barely saw her. Margaux Hemingway's end was an American tragedy, not because America caused every wound. That would be too easy. The tragedy was how perfectly America knew how to use them. A famous name became a marketing tool. A young woman's face became a contract. A family history of pain became a headline theme. A struggle with alcohol became celebrity texture. A suicide became another chapter in a dynasty people had already decided was cursed. Very moving, very profitable, very familiar. Margaux did not fall from nowhere. She fell from a height built too quickly beneath her feet. The $1 million contract was real. The beauty was real. The charm was real. The talent in front of a camera was real. But the structure around her was weak. Fame arrived before foundation. That is dangerous. It tells a young person she is chosen before she knows who is choosing, why they are choosing, and what they expect in return. Margaux was sold as Babe. America should have listened to that word more carefully. A babe is not a woman with a full interior life. A babe is an image, a sail, a mood, a beautiful surface. Margaux spent years trying to prove there was someone underneath the surface, someone funny, naive, hurt, honest, angry, addicted, recovering, failing, trying again, someone with more to her than Hemingway blood and 1970s lighting. But the easiest story kept winning. Beautiful girl, famous name, bad luck. No, too simple. Margaux's life was not a warning against beauty. It was a warning against turning a person into a symbol before she has the strength to survive the symbolism. The Hemingway name did not kill her by itself. The fashion industry did not kill her by itself. Hollywood did not kill her by itself. Alcohol, depression, family pain, exploitation, fame, and loneliness formed a system around her. And systems are harder to blame than curses. That is why people prefer curses. They sound cleaner, but Margaux deserves a harder sentence, a fuller one, a less convenient one. She was not just Ernest Hemingway's granddaughter. She was not just Mariel's sister. She was not just the $1 million face. She was a woman America turned into a dream, then treated like a failure when she woke up inside it. That is the tragedy. Not that the dream ended, that the dream was never built to protect the person living in it.